The observation deck of the Galactic Unity fell silent as Admiral Vextar studied the tactical display. Red dots swarmed across the holographic projection like angry wasps, each representing a Wraith assault craft. The alien fleet had materialized from dark space without warning, their quantum disruption weapons already tearing through the outer defense grid. "Status report," Vextar commanded, his forearms working frantically across multiple control surfaces. As a Cathari, he was considered one of the galaxy's premier military strategists, his species having evolved specifically for warfare over millions of years. 70% of our fleet is compromised, reported Captain Zilnara, her crystalline form flickering with stress patterns. The Wraith's new technology is unprecedented. Our Nexium battlesuits are failing across all units. Vextar's primary heart sank. Nexium armor was the pinnacle of galactic military technology, a living metal that adapted to any threat, powered by quantum cores that could withstand the heat of dying stars. It had made the Galactic Coalition invincible for 3 centuries. Until today. "Sir," came a voice from across the bridge. "The human is requesting permission to deploy." Every head on the bridge turned toward the small figure standing near the auxiliary station. Lieutenant Sarah Chen looked impossibly fragile among her alien crewmates. No natural armor, no redundant organs, no evolved weapons. Just flesh and bone wrapped in standard-issue combat fatigues that seemed laughably primitive compared to the Nexium suits worn by everyone else. "Absolutely not," Vextar replied immediately. "Human, your species' contribution to this war effort is noted, but this is not a scenario for improvisation." Sarah stepped forward, her brown eyes steady. "Admiral, with respect, improvisation is exactly what we need right now. Your Nexium suits are failing because they're trying to adapt to something completely new, but sometimes the oldest solutions work when the newest ones don't. You wish to deploy in that?" Captain Zilnara gestured toward Sarah's equipment. "Standard kinetic armor and chemical propulsion? Against Wraith quantum disruptors?" "I wish to deploy with this," Sarah tapped her temple. "Human intuition, pattern recognition, and a really stubborn refusal to give up." Vextar considered this. Humans had only joined the Galactic Coalition 50 years ago, but they'd already earned a reputation for what other species politely called creative problem-solving. Less politely, they called it insane luck or evolutionary stubbornness. "The human concept of will is not quantifiable," he said finally. "We need tactical solutions." "Then let me show you what human will looks like when it's quantified," Sarah replied. Before Vextar could object, alarm screamed across the bridge. The Wraith flagship had broken through the defensive line and was bearing down on the Unity itself. Around them, the last Nexium-equipped fighters sparked and died as the quantum disruptors found flaws in their adaptive armor faster than the living metal could compensate. "All units fall back to the core world," Vextar ordered. "We'll establish a final defensive perimeter at permission to launch, Admiral." Sarah was already moving toward the hangar bay. 30 seconds, that's all I need." Something in her voice made Vextar pause. It wasn't desperation or bravado. It was the quiet confidence of someone who had done impossible things before and expected to do them again. "Granted," he said. "But human, Chen, what makes you think primitive armor will succeed where Nexium has failed?" Sarah paused at the door and smiled. "Because, Admiral, my armor doesn't try to be perfect. It just tries to be good enough. And sometimes good enough is exactly what you need." Minutes later, Sarah's fighter streaked away from the Unity. Her ship was a relic by galactic standards. Metal plates welded over a titanium frame, powered by controlled chemical explosions that any civilized species had abandoned millennia ago. But it moved with an unpredictable grace that the Wraith targeting systems couldn't seem to lock onto. The first quantum disruptor blast should have vaporized her instantly. Instead, it punched a hole through her left wing. Sarah compensated with manual thrusters, spinning through a maneuver that would have killed any other species from the G-forces alone. "Human, your armor is compromised." Vexatar's voice crackled through the comm. "Armor's fine," Sarah replied, wrestling with her controls as another blast took out her primary engine. "Still got 3 more engines, half my weapons, and most of my ship. That's a passing grade where I come from." The Wraith flagship loomed ahead, its hull bristling with the exotic energy weapons that had made short work of the galaxy's finest technology. Sarah's targeting computer flickered and died under a cascade of quantum interference. No problem, she muttered, switching to manual targeting. Great-grandpa shot down Messerschmitts with less than this. What followed was less a dogfight than a demonstration of the fundamental difference between evolved perfection and stubborn adaptation. The Wraiths had optimized their vessels for fighting Nexium armor, living metal that healed itself, adapted, and responded to threats with mathematical precision. They had no protocols for fighting something that simply absorbed damage and kept coming. Sarah's fighter took hit after hit. Her right engine exploded, her life support failed, and her hull developed more holes than metal. But she kept flying, kept firing, kept finding new ways to make broken systems work. When her main weapons failed, she rigged the backup power supply to overload through the targeting laser. When her navigation went dark, she used the pattern of stars visible through the hull breaches. "Impossible," breathed Captain Zilnara as they watched Sarah's battered craft weave through the Wraith defenses. Her vessel should have been destroyed 5 times over. Should have been, Vextar agreed, his 4 eyes wide with something approaching awe. But she refuses to acknowledge that fact. Sarah's final approach to the Wraith flagship was more controlled crash than attack run. Her ship, what was left of it, slammed into the enemy's command section with enough kinetic force to crack their quantum core housing. The explosion that followed lit up half the system. In the silence that followed, the remaining Wraith ships simply stopped. Without their flagship's quantum coordination, they were just individual vessels with no tactical coherence. The Coalition fleet, battered but intact, made quick work of the scattered enemy. Hours later, search and rescue teams pulled Sarah from what remained of her cockpit. She was unconscious, bleeding from a dozen wounds, and her primitive armor was little more than scrap metal. But she was alive and she was smiling. When she woke up in the medical bay, Vextar was waiting for her. "Human," he said formally. "I believe I owe you an apology. And an explanation." "No explanation needed, Admiral." Sarah winced as she sat up. Sometimes the fancy stuff breaks down. When that happens, you fall back on the basics. Humans are really, really good at basics. "The Nexium armor failed because it tried to be perfect," Vextar continued. "It attempted to adapt to every possible threat, to evolve beyond any weakness. But perfection, we have learned, can become its own weakness." Sarah nodded. "Perfect armor protects you from everything except the thing it wasn't designed for. But armor that's just good enough, that's already survived whatever the universe could throw at it. It doesn't need to adapt, it already knows how to endure." "And human will?" Vextar asked. "How do we quantify that?" Sarah grinned despite her injuries. "Easy, Admiral. Human will is the refusal to accept that impossible means the same thing as difficult. We don't have the best armor, or the fastest ships, or the smartest computers, but we have something better, which is, we have the absolute bone-deep certainty that if something needs doing, and we're the only ones who can do it, then we'll find a way. Even if it kills us, especially if it kills us." Later, as the Unity began its journey back to Coalition space, Vextar stood again at the observation deck. The human fighter, or what remained of it, was secured in the cargo bay, a twisted monument to the galaxy's most valuable lesson, that sometimes the strongest armor wasn't made of living metal or quantum fields. Sometimes it was made of sheer, stubborn, impossible-to-kill human determination, and that armor, Vextar reflected, had never failed them yet.